Hey everyone!
Hola a todos!
This is Jahaira.
And this is Stephanie, and welcome to Cuento Crimen podcast.
Y aquí on the Cuento Crimen podcast, we are a true crime podcast and we bring a new case every Wednesday.
Cada miércoles.
And these are cases that don't get much media attention, so chances are you haven't heard of some of these cases.
And we cover these cases in Spanglish.
Así que agarra a tu abuelita, tu abuelito, tu mamá, tu papá, a quien tú gustes, and come join us every Wednesday for a new true crime case. Hoy vamos a hablar sobre Nohema Graber, and she was 66 years old at the time of this case, and she had lived a full life with lots of changes, and she was still living and enjoying her life as a teacher. She was described as a loving mother, community leader, a friend, and I feel like the role of a teacher is always super underestimated. Like, all the time that you put and all the effort that you put into working with the youth, it's a lot. Like, being an educator, I feel like we don't give enough props.
Yeah, snaps to
I'm
educators.
Not being biased, but it's a lot of work.
It's true. It's like both physically and mentally a lot.
It is. And I feel like a lot don't understand that. Like,
and emotionally too, because you get really attached to kids.
You do. And I feel like a lot, it's like just the title of just a teacher, or you're just a teacher. No, a teacher, it's hard, you know? But it's very rewarding. And she herself was described as a wonderful teacher, and she was very well respected.
But before she became an educator, she lived another life. And I think that's really cool how some people have these like really distinct stories in just one life. Like it feels like a person lives multiple lives in one, right?
Yeah.
I think that's so cool. Like, I feel like that's a personal goal of mine.
Just
to be able to say, like, in another life, I did this, you know?
Ooh.
And I feel like this is her, you know? She did a lot, and we'll go into it.
Yeah. So Nohema, who back then was actually Nohema Castillo y Castillo, was born in Jalapa, Mexico, and that is the capital of Veracruz, Mexico. And her birth was an unexpected child, so she was a surprise. Her older siblings were only given the last name Castillo Castillo, whereas hers was Castillo y Castillo. And I know when I first read her last name, Steph was like, yeah, it's Castillos y Castillos. And I was like, wait, are you sure? But we read on, and yes, it was. It's because sus papás tenían el mismo apellido.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I think I had like an acquaintance like in school where they had the same last name twice.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, pretty cool. And the reason why was because the clerk who registered her birth was from a town that followed an old tradition by using E in between last names. And it makes sense because like you hear how some people have they in their last name. So it's just like maybe a tradition, you know? But yeah, Nohema was super proud of her last name. She loved how it was.
Honestly, yeah, I feel like I would too.
It's really unique.
Yeah. And as we were saying, ella vivía una vida muy interesante. Nohema became a flight attendant for Mexicana de Aviación, which is a company that's no longer in use. And then she studied to become a commercial airline pilot. And that's when she became one of the first women in Mexico to fly passenger jets.
Yeah, I think it's like one of the first or even the first one. I'm not too sure, but that's amazing.
That's a big title to hold.
Right? Like, this is what I'm saying. Like, she did this and then she's like an educator later in life. Like, that's so cool. Nohema was a former pilot of 17 years. So a ella le gustaba viajar, and it shows. I mean, she was in the business, in aviation for so long.
Nohema conoció a su futuro esposo, Paul Graber, cuando eran adolescentes. They met at a party as teenagers, and 11 years later, he was flying for business, and he called Nohema because he had a layover in her city. And it just so happened que también ella estaba descansando ese día. We love coincidence, you know, great love stories. And that was the beginning of their love story. And pretty soon they got married.
She continued her career with the airlines and had a job as a consultant in Mexico City. And she and her husband loved living in Mexico City, and they would travel often to Fairfield, Iowa to visit Paul's family.
Eventually, ellos se mudaron a Fairfield, Iowa in the late years of the 1990s and tuvieron 3 hijos. A los 50 años de edad, Nohema decidió que she wanted to get a degree in English and that she also wanted to get her teaching certificate from Iowa Wesleyan University in Mount Pleasant. And allí ella recibió su maestría in Spanish Arts from the University of Northern Iowa in Cedar Falls. So I think this is like what Steph was saying, like, you know, she had this whole life, like being a flight attendant and like with the jets and everything. And then de repente, she's like, oh, I want to be
Go back to school and then, you know, be a teacher.
Y siento que no se va a molestar si comparto esto, pero tengo una compañera de trabajo y también she has a degree in culinary.
That's so cool.
And she was a chef and she worked at like restaurant her whole life. Y también igual dijo que ahora, you know, yeah, after so many years that she decided to be an educator. And so it's really cool, you know?
Yeah. That's pretty cool. And as an educator, her first job was at Ottawa High School, and she taught there until 2012. Then she taught Spanish at the Fairfield High School since 2012 until this crime was committed in 2021.
Y, you know, as the years passed by, ella fue reconocida por muchos niños porque, pues, you know, you start with one class, crecen, al rato vienen los hermanitos, like all their siblings. And so they end up having the same teacher and the name gets repeated. And like me as an educator, I see that, you know, like I've taught siblings. So I definitely relate to that.
I think that's so cool.
It is.
It's like, I don't know.
But it's also like, wow, like time is flying, you know?
I think it's tough on the teachers.
Yeah, it is. I'm like, dang, it's been that long.
Yeah. And so a little more on Nohema's life. Unfortunately, Nohema and Paul had gotten a divorce, but remained friends. And at this point of the story, they were 5 years divorced and they were both living their separate lives.
That's nice when like relationships end in good terms, pues. Like the terms of like when there's children involved.
Yeah.
And so, you know, Nohema continued to live her life and she enjoyed walking at Chautauqua Park during her evenings and she just loved being outdoors. That's why she frequented the park. And, you know, especially as a teacher, like I think it's really needed to have an outlet and kind of like reset and just not lose or stress yourself. And so on November 2nd of 2021, ella hizo lo mismo. Era un día normal. Entonces, después del trabajo, ella fue a caminar un poco. But después de esto, ya nadie escuchó nada de ella.
Su familia la reportó desaparecida al siguiente día, November 3rd, 2021, after never returning home from her walk. Entonces, las autoridades empezaron a investigar and they started looking at the places that, you know, she would go, you know, often to, and one being the park.
Y desafortunadamente, después de que ella fue reportada desaparecida, al siguiente día, her body was found under a tarp, wheelbarrow, and railroad ties. And after further investigation, it showed that Nohema had suffered inflicted trauma to the head.
Cuando toda esta información salió a la luz, everyone was shocked because who would do this to Nohema?
Mm-hmm.
Like, who would do this to a teacher, someone who is well known and well respected in the community?
And this is where it gets a little like interesting, like plot twist, porque después la policía received a tip de que dos estudiantes posiblemente pudieron haber sido involucrados with this whole situation. And the students' names were Willard Noble Chident Miller and Jemery Everett Goodell. And both of these students were students at Fairfield High School, and both were 16 years old.
So it was said that Jeremy maybe posted or shared details about the planning, like leading up to the killing. And then it was also revealed in that Willard was present. But we did not really get a full like understanding of what was meant by posted, because in other articles, they said that these were like messages through Snapchat with another student maybe, and that this person was the one that, you know, talked to authorities, and this was the tip, like this person witness.
Yeah.
Or not witness, right?
But I guess like, I mean, not also bystander because they weren't there, but just, I guess they just knew. Like, they heard.
They had information, like this is the person who provided the tip, right?
And I'm glad that they spoke up porque es muy fácil, ¿verdad? Que tus amigos hagan algo mal, and we always typically hear how they protect their friends instead of like being true and speaking the truth.
Yeah, this person was pretty active about it, like pretty proactive and did it right away.
And también hubo testigos that placed Jeremy at the park. And this was enough for authorities to obtain a warrant.
Y cuando van a sus casas, they find clothes with blood, strands of hair, bath towels, and 2 baseball bats, all of which were considered as evidence. And then all this was found in Jeremy's house.
And the witness who placed Jeremy at the park describes the clothing that Jeremy was wearing to investigators. Y es la misma ropa that the investigators found at his home with bloodstains. And, obviously, there was something with those going on.
Mm-hmm. And when authorities talked to Willard, he also admitted to being at the park. During an interview with detectives, Willard admitted that he was at the park when the murder was taking place and that he was the person to provide the materials used in the murder, and also that he helped get rid of Nohema's body or hide the body.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point in the interview or his interviews, he was saying that there was a quote-unquote roving group of kids that killed Nohema, and that he was forced to provide the wheelbarrow, and that also, you'll learn later, but he was supposedly forced to drive Nohema's car out of the park.
On November 4th, they were both arrested and charged with first-degree murder and conspiracy to murder. Their bond was set to $1 million, and they are being charged as adults.
On November 23rd, their attorneys requested the bond to be lowered, but it wasn't.
Why should it? I don't know.
A lot. I know it's a lot of money, but the crime,
it's pretty serious.
Yeah. So I agree with that. Their attorney was arguing that, these kids lived their entire life in Fairfield, and in Jeremy's case, the attorney was saying that his father wouldn't be able to afford a bond like that. That's something more reasonable that he could maybe afford would be like $10,000. And she also mentioned that Jeremy didn't have a passport or a driver's license, so he wouldn't really flee, right?
I don't know. I feel like there's a lot there. I don't know. We're not going to go into it because then we're going to go on a whole tangent.
Yeah.
But prosecutors said that no, the bond should remain at $1 million or even be raised to $2 million, again, given the nature of the crime. Y yo entiendo, ¿verdad?, que son niños and, they're teenagers. But at the end of the day, they killed someone.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like it was premeditated.
Yes, super planned out.
Yeah.
But yeah, their attorneys were, trying to, I guess, do their job, right?
Mm-hmm.
Willard's attorney was saying that having, young kids away from their families for long periods of time before the trial can have a quote-unquote detrimental effect. And maybe it can, right? But as we were saying, these crimes are so planned out, and they're young, but I feel like at that age, what's right from wrong,
I was going to say, they had to know what they were doing.
Yeah.
It's not an accident to accidentally kill your teacher.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, they were trying because Willard's attorney also suggested to maybe consider a GPS type of monitor so the kids could go home, but they still denied it all. So both Willard and Jeremy pleaded not guilty and are being held at a $1 million cash bond awaiting trial.
So now we're going to move into the crime y todo lo que está pasando. So with court documents and evidence coming up, we find out more details about the case, and we know more about qué es lo que pasó ese día.
Yeah, and I think now we will understand why the judge was saying no to all these requests, because these details are a lot and they're gruesome. On November 2nd, 2021, evidence shows that Nohema parked her car at the park around 4 p.m. And this is something she would do often. And then after 42 minutes, it is shown that her car is leaving the park, but with 2 males in the front of the van. And later her car is abandoned on a rural road.
And evidence también demuestra that Willard and Jeremy stalked Nohema. Ellos aprendieron su rutina día a día, and ellos sabían dónde estaba, lo que iba a hacer en esta hora, and they just knew everything. So again, it goes back to how this was premeditated. Y ellos hicieron todo esto porque ellos tenían planeado atacarla with a baseball bat and beat her to death while she was on her daily walk. So that's what they did, and then they dragged her into the woods, returning later to hide her body. So this is all planned out.
All planned out. They returned to the scene, right? And later, another witness tells police that they saw a wheelbarrow being pushed down a city street just before midnight on November 2nd, 2021. So, it seems like they are returning to the scene. They went back home. They're like maybe exchanging text messages. Everything's being planned out.
And that's crazy to me. Like, que tuvieron tanta calma de dejar su cuerpo allí, irse a la casa, como dices tú, hablar, planear, get their story straight, and then todavía regresar y a ver qué van a hacer con el cuerpo.
Yeah.
Like, it seems very, like, calm. Like, they took their time.
Yeah.
That makes it scary. The search warrants say how Willard admitted to killing Nohema with a baseball bat. But he initially denied any involvement and said that he only provided the wheelbarrow because he was being forced by a group of masked kids. I think it's very common, like, for kids to switch up their stories. You're young, you're scared, you know what you did. So that's, like, the big thing.
And in this case, there's a lot of, like, requests from the attorneys and reasons why the trial has been, like, delayed. And one of the reasons was that Willard's attorney was trying to get a motion filed to suppress certain evidence and statements. And she alleges that constitutional rights violations were made by investigators against Willard during the investigation. And so a little bit more on that. The attorney claims that Willard's mother was presented with a juvenile waiver informing her that law enforcement wanted to talk to her son, but she wasn't informed that authorities wanted to talk to him because he was a suspect in a homicide investigation. And, like, yeah, I guess, that is real because he is underage, and so he should have, like, a lawyer present.
Yeah.
But we don't know to what extent all that is true. We don't really know. But point is, the attorney wants the court to invalidate 4 search warrants and to suppress evidence from what they found at his house and all the comments and also the Snapchat messages. Like, they want all that to go away and not to be presented in court.
I feel like there's a lot of layers.
And then so the judge denied this motion to suppress all this information. And then the attorney asked Iowa Supreme Court to review the judge's decision on this, and she asked the judge to stay proceedings in the case until the high court rules.
Willard Miller and Jeremy Goodell were students at Fairfield High School, y allí es donde Nohema era maestra de español. They were both charged with first-degree homicide and first-degree conspiracy to commit homicide, and they will be again trialed as adults due to the nature of their crimes and their ages.
So again, the attorneys are asking the judge to move their case to a juvenile court because if tried as adults and convicted, Jeremy and Willard will spend a significant time in prison. And so here we see the attorneys here again trying to do everything they can, right? They're trying to get these teens into the juvenile court rather than being tried as adults.
At the end, though, a judge did reject the request to move this case to a juvenile court. Jeremy and Willard will each face a first-degree murder charge. And all I'm saying is, like, it might seem harsh porque son, again, teenagers and they're being seen as adults, but, like, they killed their teacher.
Yeah.
And they planned it. Así como planearon esta, pueden planear otra.
Yeah, and, like,
it's nothing light.
It's in, like, high school. Mm-hmm. I don't know. I feel like they're really close to being 18.
Yeah, too close, yeah. So a supposed motive was said in social media posts and messages, but again, it has never been public until more court information unraveled. So the possible motive was, probably you all guessed it, a poor grade or an unfair grade.
Yeah, over a poor grade. Like, that is crazy. Like, for that.
Yeah. It's like resentment, but that's, I don't know. Not a healthy way to go about.
Yeah, not a healthy way. I think there's other ways. You could talk to your parents, talk to, like, a counselor, and, like, I don't know, maybe try to get, like, it reviewed by someone else, But yeah, there's just so many other ways. They are being tried as adults, and I think they will have, obviously they're going to face a lot of time, but they will have the ability for parole. And, because the adult sentence for first-degree murder in Iowa is life in prison. Although in 2016, the Iowa Supreme Court banned judges from imposing murder sentences of life without parole for offenders under the age of 18. So Willard's trial is scheduled to begin March 20, 2023. So it has not happened yet. And then Jeremy's trial
was on December 5th of this year, 2022, but we couldn't find if it actually happened. So our guess is that it kind of got pushed back porque no hallamos respuestas ni, anything about it. So we're just going to make the assumption that it was probably pushed back.
I mean, this case is a really tragic one, and I'm just glad that, they have the people responsible and they're going to pay, with jail time and they're not going to be on the streets. But yeah, it's just so sad that someone with such a great life and so many great stories of travel and, she had a family and became a teacher, all these things, like, it just sucks that 2 kids with a bad choice,
And that's a big action to take. And I feel like they were so young, they did not calculate the consequences it was going to bring, because that's basically like you throwing your life away if you think about it.
And so many people lost Nohema, right?
Yeah.
She was a community person, so her family, her friends, and everyone in the community lost her. And a friend, Edith Cabrera, a longtime friend, said in a quote, "She was an exceptional person, a lovely person, especially with her family, even with her students. She was a great friend, a great community leader, and even a better person," end quote.
That was a very sweet description. So Nohema's son, Christian, y su hija, Nohema Marie, both said on Facebook that they had forgiven her alleged murderers. That, I feel like that shows how mature they are. Like they're healing, they're grieving the loss of their mother. It's tough.
Yeah, I feel like you have to be a really big person for that. Like, be the bigger person, I guess, because that's crazy. Like, this is your mother, and to be able to get to that point where you forgive her murders, that's like a lot of growth and just letting go and not holding on to that anger.
Yeah, but then again, it's also like, well, forgive but don't forget, right?
Yeah.
Like, they'll never forget. And I think it's also like, cada quien, lo hace a su manera y cada quien toma su tiempo, but maybe it's just part of the closure that they need, and to not feel that anger inside. I feel like it's a lot.
Yeah. Nohema was quoted by the Southeast Iowa Union newspaper a couple of days before her death. And it was about an article of the Day of the Dead. And in the article, she said her family celebrated the holiday for its religious meaning. And she also said, and I quote, "We all know we're all going to die. It's our way of laughing at death," end quote.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I think that quote speaks for itself.
Yeah. And just a couple of days before, like.
Yeah. This case is very tragic. Se enseña that no matter the age, no matter the circumstances, the relationship that you have with this, like with people, you just never know. Like, uno nunca sabe lo que pueda pasar. She was a teacher, just living her life, doing her best. And some students just took all of that from her. It's really crazy. And this was Nohema's case, and we hope you enjoyed the episode for this week. And always a reminder, feel free to send requests. Ya saben lo que les va a decir Stephanie. Try to leave a review.
Yeah, I'm always the one to say it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness, yes. And also, like, we've been getting very kind messages on Instagram too. So muchas gracias.
Se los agradecemos mucho. Yeah, I really do enjoy reading the reviews. Like, I always screenshot them and send them to you.
Yeah, she does.
And I'm like, yes, tell me more.
Yeah. And also, like, criticism too. Like, we've always said that we are... Like, we welcome criticism, but in a nice way, like constructive criticism, like feedback that is actually going to be useful and not just rude, mean ones. Because we've gotten some.
One.
And it was just like, oh, okay.
It was fun.
Yeah.
And, like, we still took the feedback, but it was like, it could have been phrased differently, like human to human, like.
Somos personas.
Yeah. and like, we intend to do well, like
we
to
do.
Serve the community in a positive way. So,
yeah.
And if we mess up, and we just have to fix it.
And you grow from it.
Yeah.
But we're not gonna go too much into that.
Yeah.
Muchas gracias a todos. Les mandamos un abrazo, of course, with your consent. And we will see you all next week.